Well, I want to bring in my panel, Liberal MP Tim Wilson and Labor MP Josh Burns, who are both joining me from Melbourne. I'm going to start with you, Josh. We'll get to Tim in a moment. Really stressful information, I thought, was shared today, that people are not complying with the stay-at-home orders. They feel sick, they're still going out. They're going to get the test, but they're still going out while they're waiting for the results. What do we do about that? Sure, the government says don't do that anymore, but they are doing it. Clearly, it's leading to a spread. What do you do about it?
It's a really good question, PK, in afternoon. I think that what's really important here is that people have support during this pandemic. And if people are making the hard decision about whether or not they stay home or whether they go to work when they're feeling unwell, well, then we need to make sure that that decision's made a lot easier for the people in that position. And I think that the Premier today outlined the Victorian hardship payment, or reminded everyone that the Victorian hardship payment is there. It's $1,500 to make sure that you can pay for all of the goods, and so that you can pay for all of the food that you need. But this is not just about buying food; it's also about people working in insecure work, and this is something that's been a problem for a long time in the economy, and something that we need to address in the long term. Sure,
but it's not just about money then, is it? Because in Victoria there is that payment; it is available, and I think it was $1,200. That's from memory. People who've called the number and tried to get that money. So it can't just be financial.
Look, whatever it is, we need to make sure that we're supporting people throughout this pandemic. It's the reason why Jobkeeper was introduced. It's a reason why the JobSeeker coronavirus supplement was introduced. People need to be supported throughout this pandemic. And I just think that our attitude needs to be that we are here to support people, that the government must be supporting people. The Victorian government, I think, again, has reminded people that they've provided a $1,500 hardship payment, and that's really welcome. But if people are worried about their job, and if people are worried about whether or not they can feed their kids, well, that's a decision that they're going to make, and they're going to go to work. And unfortunately, that's where we're seeing a lot of the transmission occurring. So I would just again urge people to if you're worried, contact your Member of Parliament's office. I'm sure Tim's office and certainly my office is here to help. We are here to help you access government services, and we're here to support you during this difficult time.
Tim Wilson, I just want to ask you what you make of that. People not self-isolating, you're in Melbourne, people making that decision. What do you think about what's happening here? Is it because of casualisation that people worry about not having money, or, clearly losing their jobs or not getting more shifts? Is that a concern?
Well, I don't think we should be using a pandemic as a proxy to have discussion around industrial relations policy. When it comes down to it, what we need to be doing is focusing on providing support and assistance for people in that circumstance. And I recognise the state government has provided hardship payments to make sure that people don't feel they need to make those difficult decisions. And that's the challenge that many people, some people clearly are facing. But I don't think it's just that. I suspect that, unfortunately, there are some people who don't necessarily appreciate the severity of the situation, and they've gone off to get tested because they're not sure whether they've got symptoms and whether it's COVID-19, and then going back to work, that they are aware necessarily they should be taking the full measures to make sure they isolate until they get their results.
So do we need to have a broader conversation, though, about casualisation as well? I mean, you say you give credit to the government in Victoria for the hardship payment. Is that also something that needs to happen nationally? Casey Briggs made the point that in New South Wales such a payment doesn't exist.
Well, Victoria's situation, New South Wales' situation is very different. In our state, we haven't had, in New South Wales, they haven't had the spectacular balls up, frankly, like we've had under our state government, where they've basically enabled the situation to occur. They have a responsibility to play a role in addressing it. The role of the federal government is to make sure that we provide support and assistance to people across the country in a sustainable way. That's why we introduced the Jobkeeper wage subsidy in these difficult times. That's why we provided JobSeeker and JobSeeker supplements to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic, and we'll provide the support that Australians need to make sure that they can get through this.
So, we know that this is an issue. That's why the Premier told us a really strong message from the Victorian government to not do this, to apply for the money and so forth. Is a message enough? Does it need to be a stick as well? I mean, isn't that sort of, Josh, something that needs to be considered if people keep continuing to do this and it continues to spread?
Look, I think, Patricia, that the Premier has made it pretty clear that the Victoria Police are not going to be hesitating to issue fines. And I don't know the exact number of fines off the top of my head, but it certainly has been significant and people are being fined. But I really believe that this is a pandemic and that we need to be supporting people throughout this time. And unfortunately, what we're seeing is the sort of cases is that the people who are being put in this position of choosing between going to work or staying at home need support right now. And we need to make that decision easier for people. And we need to make it absolutely clear for people that you can stay home, that your job's not going to be lost, and that you're going to have support to provide food and everything that you need for you and your family. That's the most important thing that we need right now.
Tim Wilson, is there an inevitability about going to further restrictions if sort of the mask strategy doesn't work and we don't see the numbers coming down in coming days?
Well, I hope not. I mean, when it comes down to it, I'm not sure that going through rolling lockdowns and harder clampdowns is going to be sustainable for an entire state. But obviously, as the scientific and medical advice and events unfold, the government will have to make informed decisions based on what's in the challenge of sustainably addressing the spread of the virus. But my hope is that Victorians will exercise responsibility. Victorians understand that if they have symptoms, they get tested, they don't go to work, and that they're in a position where we can contain it. Now, we're already in unprecedented times, and my hope is that they won't continue to be unprecedented because we'll get that under control. But, of course, the state government has flagged that those are options, and so we will deal with them as they come along, I'm sure. I
just want to talk about some economic issues before I let you both go. Yesterday, of course, big announcements on Jobkeeper and Jobseeker. Tim Wilson, still with you, and then I want to ask you this too, Josh. The unemployment benefit Jobseeker is the one that I'm particularly wondering what might happen with. There's been a call for a long time for a permanent increase. It hasn't happened. The supplement's been cut. It also expires in December. Tim Wilson, shouldn't there be a permanent embedded increase in this crucial payment, particularly given 2 million Australians will be on that benefit as of December?
Well, the current Jobseeker payment, the COVID supplement, is there to support people during this crisis. Now, what happens after this crisis, and depending on how long it goes on from the pandemic, the government will continue to review policy. But what do you think?
Do you think there should be a permanent increase? That's the question.
Well, firstly, I just outlined that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and I think we need pandemic-specific solutions to problems. Then there'll be a post-COVID world, and we'll address that. I mean, the Prime Minister and I, and I'm sure Josh, and I'm sure you, believe that the best form of support is to make sure that people are in a job, and that's where our focus and energy is going to be. One of the great misleading statements has been the rate of what used to be New Start and now Jobseeker, where there's additional supplements and support added on top of the base rate, and they will continue to be reviewed in light of the changing circumstances. But our focus is to get people back into work as quickly as possible, because those people, many of whom have never found themselves on Jobseeker, want to work, as many people who have been on Jobseeker traditionally want to work, and we want to create the opportunities so they can do so.
They definitely want to work, but the jobs just aren't there. Josh, what should the rate be? Labor keeps saying it should be increased, but you're not really offering any ideas of how much.
No, Patricia, but we are saying that it needs to permanently increase. That is a key principle here that we have been saying for a long time, that $40 a day is too low. I do think that the Prime Minister's announcements yesterday are significant. They are a reduction for people. I think that for a lot of people who were receiving Jobkeeper for a long time, this extra money has really made a big difference to their lives. And to have the extra support has been something that, you know, has meant the difference that Australians aren't living in poverty right now. And that's surely got to be an objective of the federal government, to make sure that Australians are not living in poverty. So, look, we need to get back to Parliament. We need to get back to looking at these details and to looking at this legislation, from top to bottom. And we need to make sure that the government is held to account and that we are doing everything we can to support people throughout this pandemic and to make sure Australians aren't living in poverty.
OK, that's all we have time for. Thanks to both of you. And you're both Melburnians. Are you all ready to wear your masks? I mean, it's compulsory from midnight tonight. I'm assuming you're both ready.
I can put one on now if you want to.
You've got your props. I don't mean.
I'm going to fog up, PK.
I don't mean to give you fashion advice, but I will. You might need to work a bit on. I mean, Tim, I know you like Schitt's Creek as well.
You must be saying that to Tim.
You need a bit more fashion sense. I mean, I've got this one too, but I have some really.
Well, firstly, PK. I mean, I take exception to that. Like many Victorians, I've had to race out and get a mask. I don't have them in stock. I actually have other ones on order, but these are the ones that we have available. And politely, the one I have is actually handmade by one of the mothers of one of my staff.
Oh, really?
Very generously done so.
Show us again.
I actually think we should. This one, this is a disposable one, but the one I have in my office. And I actually think, I'd like to say, Mrs. Langford, thank you so much for making the face mask, and it's very generous. And I'm sorry that PK is trying this. It looks almost identical to this one, and it's exactly the same colour. And blue is my colour.
Okay, all right. It's good to clarify. I didn't mean to insult anyone, but I did. See you later. That's Liberal MP Tim Wilson and Labor MP Josh Burns, because in Melbourne we're all going to be wearing
no worries.
our masks from tonight, so we're getting